Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Top 10 Things to Know About Salesforce DX. I am not Michelle Obama. Sorry, I feel like that's where everybody is. Thank you guys for being here to take a tour, an insider's look at what's going on with Salesforce DX. As always, before I begin, I direct your attention to the forward-looking statements warning. You've all seen this before. Don't buy anything based on stuff we say, only based on publicly available information. So I am Josh Kaplan, not Michelle Obama. I am a product manager working on the programmatic platform, working on Salesforce DX. Very excited about this product. I'm sure you've heard a bunch about it. So this is going to be a little bit of a different view, kind of an overview with some inside information, what's going on in there and how you might be able to best use it. First thing you need to know, some history. How did this happen? How did we get started on Salesforce DX to begin with? It all started out with a bit of a problem. People were doing continuous integration on our platform by deploying lots of code to lots of orgs all at one time. They were putting these monstrous deployments into the road and blocking everybody else up and causing a bit of a traffic jam. This is bad because the people who wanted to deploy, besides those doing this continuous integration, were trying to do actual deployments that had to happen within a certain time window. And while continuous integration is important, it's not as timely. And so we had a bit of an issue. We knew people had a need to have more environments, to do more work, and it wasn't working with the way things were set up. And so this problem sort of at least spurred us into this action to finally start putting the investment we needed to into making the developer experience what it's going to be with Salesforce DX. A bit of the inspiration for this also came here 2 years ago, 2 floors above us, the developer keynote. I was sitting there with a couple of other colleagues watching the dev keynote, and they were showing Heroku pipelines. And I looked at it and I said, that's the slide. That product is the slide I keep showing people on how to set up their delivery pipeline. And now there's an actual tool, a UI that can do it. And that was sort of another side of inspiration from the product and what we were going to build and what we were going to deliver. So it's not just you who get inspired by Dreamforce, we also get inspired when we come here to the conference. And that's part of what kicked off Salesforce DX as a project. Over the last 2 years, it's blessed us with some pretty interesting names that I would share some of them with you. Salesforce DX itself started as Project Janus. Janus is the Greek god of looking forward and backwards, future and past, which sort of made some sort of poetic sense. I referred to it as the Developer Sanity Project for a while, for reasons you can all probably relate. And then it became, for a long time, ACDX, App Cloud Developer Experience. App Cloud was a thing. App Cloud is not a thing anymore, so now we're no longer ACDX, but we did have a sweet logo. I'm sure there was no copyright infringement at all. And by the way, we had the Lightning in there already, so we're ready for the Lightning platform stuff. So there we go. Scratch Orgs. The thing you know today is Scratch Orgs. Very cool product. It was originally called a developer server. It's called that because the idea is it's supposed to be your personal machine that's under your desk, just virtually off in the cloud somewhere. So we called it a developer server. Didn't stick very long, but that was the original name there. It gives you some insight into what we were trying to do with building that. How many of you have heard of App Hub? Have anyone heard of this? Some of you, very few. There's a new tool that's coming out. It's going to be a UI to look at your environments and your packages and your pipelines. It's had some crazy good names. Dev Hub, Change Hub. Dev Lodge was our trailhead themed thing. We were going to have a whole lodge with animals and give you all multi-tools. You know, Salesforce DX was going to be awesome. And the new packaging has been also very fun. It started as Salesforce Archives, kind of like Java Archives and enterprise application repositories, ears, jar files. We like that concept because you're deploying a package. But we thought if a Java archive, if those are jars, we would end up being SARs. We didn't want to be SARs because we didn't want to provide bird flu to people. So we skipped on Salesforce Archives. That became not a thing. We went to Artifacts, which stuck for a long time. Makes sense. It's an artifact you're deploying, but it was too general. People couldn't grasp it. And so we went to the very, very creative. After lots of talking and lots of meetings, lots of discussion, we went to Packaging 2. That was our creative juices as they were flying. So if you've been around for a while, you know this is also not our first attempt at doing application lifecycle management. This here is a depiction of our previous attempts. And we got into the ring, we got on the horse, but we didn't necessarily get where we wanted to get to. So there's a lot of things out there already that have been in place, and we've been trying to make them better. So that brings me to thing number 2 that you need to know. You can keep your old tools for the most part. All the things that work today are still going to work, not changing just because Salesforce DX is happening. CLI itself is really just a front for all the APIs you've been using. You've built API applications to deploy, to upload data. CLI does all that for you now. So you can keep using the APIs if you'd like, but the CLI will do it for you. But I would like to say you can get rid of that Ant deployment tool. That thing is really easily replaced by the CLI. CLI is going to be much easier to use than the Ant deployment tool. If you've got it and it's working, you don't have to replace it, but you can probably move on from the Ant tool, so that's good. Managed packages are still going to do the thing they do today. If you've got one, it's still going to deploy. It's still going to work alongside of the new generation of packages. Unmanaged packages, though, we're not going to be supporting that much going forward. They're going to be replaced by a newer version of packaging, which I'll talk about in a minute. Sandboxes are still very important. You're going to need them as part of your pipeline of getting things from the developer's mind into the hands of your users. For user acceptance testing, for performance testing, for staging deployments, you're going to use them throughout your development lifecycle. You can also continue to use them the way you do today as an environment where admins go and make changes, and then they use change sets to deploy those things to production. So that's still going to work. Those things aren't going away. For the most part, all the tools we've had today that you've used today are still going to be in place, and you continue to use them. Which brings me to my next point. Salesforce DX is not an all-or-nothing proposition. Unlike this gentleman here who's got a very binary set of outcomes when he makes his jump, you don't have to completely go in full speed, cross the chasm to get into Salesforce DX. You can choose to take just a portion of your application and start using Salesforce DX on that portion while leaving the rest do the development process you do today. So you can have change sets being used to deploy certain parts of the application alongside all these cool new tools deploying other parts of the application. That's perfectly acceptable. We designed it to work that way. You will be okay with doing that. So number 4 thing you need to know is you need to set up a very good project directory structure. I think this is going to be what's going to make or break how your entree into Salesforce DX is. What do I mean by that? You're going to DXify. I couldn't get the trademark logo to post there. Trademark. You're going to DXify your application by extracting it and putting it into DX projects. And these are going to be subdirectories in one large folder of all your application. Each one's going to be, the content of each is going to be a distinct set of metadata that is logically connected. So it's Lightning components and the Apex classes that support them, or it's workflow rules and the custom fields that support them, things that are logically connected. And typically they should be things that are managed by a common set of people, a team, that can have access to this. So you can control who's making changes to which parts of the application. Effectively, you've got the set of all your metadata, and you're going to be drawing lines around it, circles around it, and saying each of these parts is now going to be its own DX project. You're going to be dividing up your org that way. Now, as I said before, you don't have to divide the whole thing up. You can divide parts of it up and start slowly. How can you divide your org up? There's lots of ways. And there's really no right answer. We've tried to come up with the right answer, but we don't have one because everyone's situation is different. You can just say, I'm going in whole org. I'm putting my whole org into one project, and I'll subdivide it later. That'll work. You can take a distinct application that doesn't have any connection to other parts of your org, and you can make that be one project. You can take some common utilities, some shared things like schema or Apex utility classes, and you can make projects out of that. I can't tell you the right answer because all of you have a different situation, but this is the goal. You need to set up a directory structure that logically defines the different parts of your entire org. I'm sure that all makes 100% sense, right? If it doesn't now, it will as you dive in. And when you dive in, watch out for dependencies. Circular dependencies are not going to be good. If you've got something like an Apex trigger, it obviously depends on your schema. So schema doesn't depend on the trigger depends on your schema. You can very easily get into a situation where you've put a whole bunch of stuff into one project that depends on another project, and then things in there are going to depend back on this one. Try to keep it so you can have it, I could install things in an order, 1, 2, 3, 4, and every time I install, everything it needs is already in that org. Think of it that way. Watch out for your dependencies. So why is this all important? How are we going to help you with this? This is all leading to developer-controlled packages. This is the thing that's replacing the unmanaged package, basically. Unmanaged package, but way better. It's a vehicle to deploy these individual projects. You can version them. You'll be able to know I version 1.10 is an upgrade from 1.9 because I changed this thing or fixed this bug. The directories you set up are going to become the developer-controlled packages that you deploy. It's also going to have dependency management, so you're going to say this package depends on that custom, that common schema or those common utilities. And you'll know when you're deploying whether you've got all the stuff and the version of the stuff you want. So setting up this directory structure is going to lead into this new deployment mechanism, which is going to be better than the way the metadata works today. So set it up now as well as you can, as best you can. Some people are probably getting scared. This is a lot. How am I going to handle all this? So this is another important point. Number 5, you can go back. You are not stuck. Unlike person accounts here, who here has accidentally turned person accounts on in your org? Yeah, raise your hands. Don't be shy. Okay, so If you turn person accounts on, you're stuck. You have it forever. Now, if you were to say start with Salesforce DX and put a bunch of stuff into the projects I just described and make some revisions and things are going well, but it's not working out, you could just deploy everything into your org, delete your repository, and start over again. Because then the org becomes a source of truth again. The history of what you've done can be erased from history, and you start over again. You can go right back to square one at any time you want. So don't be afraid. Don't worry about having to get everything right the first time you do this. You can get it wrong, and you can start up again if you want. So that's a very important point. This isn't an all in, and you have to go everything at once, and you can never go back. There's ways to roll this back, to go slowly, and to make sure you've got your footing under you before you eventually get to where you want to be. Point number 6 you need to know, when it comes to tools, you have options. One of the things we wanted to do with DX was to allow you to use the tools you wanted rather than to provide them all for you. So you want to make use of the whole world of tools out there for testing, for continuous integration, continuous delivery. We didn't want to build Git for us. We didn't want to build Jenkins for us. We wanted you to use Git and to use Jenkins. And the CLI allows you to integrate any tool you want out there into your DX process and lifecycle. There was one exception to this that I want to talk about, which is the test runner. We built a little tool for running Apex tests and setting up suites you were going to run and orgs you were going to run them against, and it became sort of, different sets of orgs and different sets of tests, and it became pretty complicated, and it became pretty intricate, and we realized we basically were building our own CI system accidentally, and we decided we didn't want to do that. We wanted you to use the CI systems that you already had out there, so we put the test runner on ice for now, where it is resting. May come back up someday, but we started building one just by accident. We realized we were building a whole CI system, so that's gone now, for now. But you have the option of any system you want to use. You should make use of the partner ecosystem. I see, where are they now? I can't see them anymore. So AutoRabbit right out here, and I see Copado and Flowsum over there. There's tools that do a lot of the deployment work that you see us talking about with Salesforce DX. And people have asked me, does this mean that what those companies are doing is not relevant anymore? I say no, absolutely not. They are going to be providing a different way to use the same tools, some user interfaces that make it easier for you to make use of Salesforce DX. One of the challenges we have in product is that we don't necessarily have all the people we want to build all the crazy dreams we come up with, and these partners out there are doing some of those crazy dreams that we just don't have the opportunity to build. So please make use of them where it makes sense for you. They're definitely a part of this Salesforce DX project and plan going forward. We've started building, you may have noticed, in Visual Studio Code. We've kind of stopped working on Eclipse, and I want to talk about that a bit. First point to know here is Visual Studio Code is not Visual Studio. They are different things. I know it's confusing because they start with the same two words. Visual Studio, Microsoft's development product. Visual Studio Code is a project that came out of Microsoft, but is open source. We've contributed to the open source project. It is a very different thing. So make sure they're distinct just by sharing a name. It was very, very easy for us to use Visual Studio Code versus Eclipse. Eclipse has some ways of getting the language server in there, but they were difficult to do. The testing we had to do was starting to take a lot of time. It took us about 1/3 as long to build our beta version of the VS Code extensions as it took to build the IDE 2 project that we had showed back at Trailhead DX in June. So it was much, much faster for us to build, and we think it'll be easier for you guys to use as well. But also, that's just one alternative. I see friends from Illuminated Cloud here. I spoke to my friends at the Welcome Suites, and there's other tools out there to develop. Visual Studio Code that we're providing is just one option for you to use. Please use it if you like it. Please use the tools provided by everybody else if you like them as well. You have options. Point number 7. To each his own scratch yard. Gone are the days of everybody piling into a single developer sandbox where everyone was making changes and everyone was updating things and overwriting each other's code, and this guy had to ride in the front and all that. Those days are done. Now everybody gets to have their own environment to do the work that they need to do. There you go, look at that. Animation trickery. This should make everyone's life so much easier. I know firsthand, I've worked on projects before I was in product. Here I was in services, and I had that situation all the time where everyone was trying to develop in one place. I know the pain. You don't have to deal with that pain anymore. You guys all have your own environments. Everybody gets to do what they need to do in their environment and then check it back into a common repository. Now you can take that integrated branch and deploy it into a sandbox and see what it looks like when everything's done, but we provided these so you can work on your own in an efficient manner. Funny story though, thing to know number 8, we didn't actually want to build Scratchworks. This is not Einstein like our product Einstein, this is actual Einstein. Some of you may be familiar with what he said about the cosmological constant. He said it was his biggest blunder. He added this constant in there to make gravity work, and he didn't like it. He said, I didn't really like to do that, but he put it in there. It turned out like 80 years later he was right, but yeah, he always called it his biggest blunder. We kind of felt a bit like that about Scratchworks. We wanted to provide that desktop machine under the desk for you. We wanted to provide you a virtual environment where you could just do development in a scalable, elastic compute environment. We couldn't make it work. We couldn't make it work in a cost-effective way. We couldn't make it work in such that you'd be able to afford to host the entirety of the stack. We couldn't stub out enough things where it wouldn't be confusing, so we ended up back. We ended up back on the platform. We ended up back in orgs, and we built things that are kind of like sandboxes, but they are purpose-built. They're purpose-built for CI. They're purpose-built for your development environment. In fact, 1 out of every 4 sandboxes has not been logged into in the past month. So 3/4 of sandboxes are just abandoned. So people built them for a purpose, started using it, and then they stopped using it. This is the elephant in the road from before. People were using the tools we provided to do the thing they needed to do, but we kept them around permanently. Sandboxes lasted forever. Scratchworks do not last forever. So even though we didn't want to build them, I think we ended up with the right solution. Just like Mr. Einstein, his constant, I think the Scratchworks ended up being the right thing in the end. It's a very important point. Think need to know number 9, admins are invited too. This is not just for developers. I know the sign says developer theater. I know that the title says developer experience, but don't forget admins are developers too. They just use different tools. Every developer out here has probably gone into the setup UI to monkey with schema or to change a validation rule or to drag around a page layout or use the lighting app builder. That's the same stuff that an admin has to do. It's no different. Just because the developer also goes and writes code doesn't make the other task different. So we support all the changes that admins are going to have to make because developers have to make those changes as well. So admins can do the same work that developers can do because it is the same work. It's not any different. So Scratchworks can be created for you if you're an admin and you have a friendly developer, someone who's willing to help you out. They can create a Scratch org, give you a login, and you can go into that org as if it were a sandbox. And you can do the changes that you were working on in the sandbox, but now you can do it in your own personal Scratch org. Not in the clown car, your own personal org. And when you're done, those same friendly people can do a source pull to their machine, and they can push this stuff over into the source repository and commit it as if a developer had done the trick. So admins can participate as well. This isn't just for developers. Even today, even at the outset, when we focused on the developers to try not to fly off the horse at a rodeo, we focused on just doing developers first. Admins are still able to participate. Please invite your admins in. Please try to get them to work with this when the time is right for them to do it. Forward-looking statements, there are some new UI on the way that will help so that the friendly developer doesn't need to be on call all the time to help out. The app hub that I mentioned that a few people raised hands for will let people go in, self-serve, create themselves a Scratch org, specify a package or one of those project directories that they want to work on, and to return, here's my changes, please go commit them for me. We're building those UIs to take that friendly developer out of the loop so that admins can, on their own, participate in Salesforce DX. So they can participate today if you're nice and friendly and help them, and they'll be able to participate on their own moving forward. I think he's saying come on, by the way. He's not saying stay back. He's saying come on. That was the best I could find. That brings me to last point, number 10. This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of what Salesforce DX is going to provide. So I feel a bit like Marvel Cinematic Universe, where everyone's sort of coming together. You got all these independent characters. You've got your app hub, and you've got your CLI, and you've got your Scratch orgs, and you've got your source-driven development, your VS Code, and everything's sort of all coming together. And then you find out the Guardians of the Galaxy are involved too, and that's kind of cool and crazy. And it's really complicated if you're looking at it like, I don't quite get this, but once you understand it, it's all pretty cool. There's all sorts of new stuff coming now. We got new features that are going. We have org cloning, and you're going to have the app hub pipelines. All sorts of new things are coming. This is not the end of Salesforce DX. GA is just the beginning. We have a lot to go. Very excited about it. Now, it would not be like me. See, by the way, Dr. Strange, that's who I get to be, just in case anyone was wondering. I'm not stopping at 10. I have bonus. Number 11, there's a Salesforce DX Trailhead Trail. Go get your badges, or Ernie will find you. He will track you down. These are a really great way to learn about what you're doing. And bonus point number 12. free GitHub for people using Salesforce DX. We have a partnership set up with GitHub where you get 6 months of GitHub business, where we get you private repositories. So when you're thinking, I don't know if I want to put my stuff on a GitHub because it's all public, there you go. 6 months of doing it private while you're kicking the tires, figuring everything out. We love using GitHub. I think you love using it too. So developer, salesforce.com/GitHub, and go there. And with that, thank you very much. Happy coding.